Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. Armie Hammer, of all people, just revealed that he's starring in a new Batman ripoff movie called The Dark Knight. That's right, you heard that right. The movie is called The Dark Knight, directed by the infamous Uwe Boll. Most people hear that name and they just associate him with like the most terrible movie adaptations ever. In what sounds like the biggest scam attempt to get Batman fans to see their ripoff movie, in trying as hard as they can to get DC and Warner Brothers to sue them out of existence. If you've ever talked to anyone who's tried to make a simple fan film, like just a straight up fan film in their backyard, the legal trouble that they get from these big companies like DC, Marvel, Star Wars is crazy. So the fact that someone like Armie Hammer and Uwe Boll are trying to make a Batman ripoff movie is like beyond incomprehensible. And as crazy as that sounds, it's even wilder because Armie Hammer himself was actually cast as Batman in the late 2000s while Christopher Nolan was still doing his Dark Knight Batman trilogy with Christian Bale. We've literally been talking about the whole problem that DC has right now, James Gunn trying to figure out whether or not he wants to have two versions of live-action Batman in the movies, Robert Pattinson in all the Matt Reeves Batman movies like the Batman 2 and James Gunn's Batman Brave and the Bold movie, or will they just make it one version of Batman? Warner Brothers was literally doing this same thing back in the late 2000s. Some of you who were following the news back then might remember, but my YouTube channel didn't exist back then, like I wasn't making YouTube videos when this was happening. So we'll break it all down, both the Armie Hammer Batman ripoff news and also his original version of Batman that he was going to play in the late 2000s. Because at the time, even though Christian Bale was chugging along with Christopher Nolan making that amazing Dark Knight trilogy, Warner Brothers had literally cast an entire Justice League movie. It was in the middle of making it, trying to release it, before Marvel released the first Avengers movie. If you're brand new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get all the videos. This isn't the first time or the last time that someone is going to try and do this too, make a Batman ripoff movie. People do it with DC, Marvel movies, Star Wars movies all the time. The reason why you usually don't hear about it that often is because of, as you probably guessed, lawyers. Normally, companies like Warner Brothers, DC, Marvel, Lucasfilm with the Star Wars stuff have a team of lawyers that take care of stuff like this. Like they will threaten to sue people out of existence for even suggesting that they'll make a movie that's even a little bit like their IP. The only time people are protected in situations like this are typical fair use type laws or if they're making a parody of something, but it's only in countries where those laws exist, so it's not the same all over the world. And in the case of this new Batman ripoff movie, it's not meant to be a parody. But if you didn't see the news, the recently disgraced Armie Hammer has started making movies again, and one of them is basically a clone of Christopher Nolan's Batman movies, and they're calling it The Dark Knight. That's right, you heard that right, they're calling their ripoff movie The Dark Knight. One of the most successful movies that Warner Brothers has ever released. Like, forget about Batman movies, DC movies, comic book movies, just one of the most successful movies in general that the studio has ever released in their entire life. It gets even better when you actually read the synopsis for what the movie is going to be. Armie Hammer is going to play a vigilante who, gets it, take justice into his own hands as he sets out to hunt down criminals, while his crusade transforms him into a social media sensation and a hero in the eyes of the public. The local police chief sees him as a menace to society and aims to take him down. Doesn't that sound familiar? Like, yeah, that sounds exactly like the Batman movies. Already sounds like a very clear case of copyright infringement, so you ask, why aren't DC and Warner Brothers suing them right now for just trying to steal the title of their movie in general? Like, even without the plot of the movie sounding like a Batman movie, doesn't the title alone make it sound like they could sue them out of existence? One of the producers behind the movie also responded to this by basically saying, don't worry, we're not planning on copying Christopher Nolan's Batman. I won't be taking any more questions. Thank you and good night. He's basically trying to tell Warner Brothers, please don't ask us for the receipts, and I won't be answering any more phone calls. You do not have to be a genius or a lawyer to know that DC and Warner Brothers are probably going to try and tear them to pieces over this, and I wouldn't be surprised if this movie, this Dark Knight clone movie, never sees the light of day, like you never hear about it again. The only reason why you would call your movie The Dark Knight or write your character as a Batman clone, put him in a black mask, is to try and trick people when they go to buy movies on digital, like on iTunes, so they see The Dark Knight and they just assume that it's a Batman movie. Most of you, though, will remember that there are hundreds and hundreds of rip-off movies out there like this. Anytime something popular comes out, doesn't matter what IP it comes from, like DC, Warner Brothers, Star Wars, literally anything. It could be anything at all. Once something blows up, people try to make a ton of cheap knockoff versions of it. This has been happening since people created the ability to actually make movies. Marvel even made jokes about this during Spider-Man Far From Home with all the in-universe Marvel movie jokes. There are literally people like this all the time in real life that make knockoff movies like this on the regular. You'd be surprised at how much money people make doing stuff like this. It's kind of like people making the Saturday Night Live parody versions of movies. Like normally you see jokes on Saturday Night Live, but people try to make movies like this and actually treat it in a very serious kind of way. Like, no, we're trying to make a serious movie here. Forget the fact that one of the worst directors of all time is trying to make this, known for doing rip-off projects like this. But I think the more interesting thing in all this, though, is the fact that it's Armie Hammer of all people who's doing it, not only because he's been in the news for a lot of really bad reasons the last couple of years, but several years ago, like I said, before he'd been disgraced in such a public manner, he had literally been cast by Warner Brothers to be that second Batman in George Miller's Justice League Mortal movie. This is some of the concept art of what his Batman was going to look like. They would have released the movie in 2011, a full year before the first Avengers movie came out, and when Christopher Nolan was still in the middle of making his Dark Knight trilogy with Christian Bale Batman. The way that Armie Hammer talks about it, they started working on the movie before Christopher Nolan had released Batman Begins, so like the world didn't really know what was going on with Christian Bale Batman yet. All the Justice League actors were cast, and I think it was in New Zealand when they went down to film, and they were like literally a week away from actually rolling camera to actually start production of the movie. But because it was happening during the 2007-2008 writer's strike where they would have been filming and they wanted to do work on the script, Warner Brothers elected to cancel the movie and just pivot to Christopher Nolan and Christian Bale Batman because Batman Begins made a lot of money and he was already in the middle of making the Dark Knight movie, but it hadn't been released yet, so like they didn't know that it was going to make gangbusters money when they were getting ready to roll camera on Justice League Mortal. But once it started to look like they were going to earn a ton of money, it sounds like Warner Brothers is like, no, we're doing fine with Christopher Nolan and Christian Bale. We'll just let them do their Batman and not worry about this Justice League movie. This is literally Armie Hammer talking about what happened with all that. And remember, he was cast as Batman during that.
You were going to be Batman in George Miller's Justice League.
Yeah.
How long were you working on it before they pulled the plug? Did you ever put a suit on?
Oh, yeah. No, Weta built us a whole functioning suit that had hydraulics and worked and had microphones all through the suit so I could hear everything happening around me. It was 100% functional because we had $300 million to do doing, doing like shoots, doing like rehearsals in the suits, all the characters in their suits. And then we got a call one day from the producers and they go, we need everybody to come in and bring all of your material, bring your scripts, bring your notes, bring everything. And we were like,
doesn't that sound crazy? Like it's totally wild that they would have had a version of Justice League with another version of Batman while Christopher Nolan and Christian Bale were blowing it up in Dark Knight, like making more money than you could count. And it was all happening long before the first Avengers movie at Marvel happened. The rest of that Justice League would have been DJ Catrona as Superman, Megan Gale as Wonder Woman, Adam Brody as Barry Allen Flash. He's actually talked about it himself too a lot since then, like, yeah, it would have been cool to be a version of the Flash. Anton Yelchin would have been a version of Wally West Flash, Hughes Kears Byrne would have been Martian Manhunter, Santiago Cabrera would have been their Aquaman, Common would have been Jon Stewart Green Lantern, Teresa Palmer would have been Talia al Ghul right after they'd done Ra's al Ghul with Liam Neeson during Batman Begins. Zoe Kazan would have been Iris West, but she would have already been married to Barry Allen Flash during the movie, and Jay Baruchel would have been Maxwell Lord. He would have been the main villain of the movie. There's a much more detailed breakdown of Armie Hammer's leaked Justice League Mortal script that he said he stole from the movie when they canceled it. I'm not going to read the whole script here because the video would be like 2.5 hours long. Maxwell Lord would have been the main villain of the movie, and they would have adapted more of his OMAC storyline from the Identity Crisis era in the comics around the same time Infinite Crisis was going on, because remember, this was like the mid to late 2000s, so that was still pretty fresh, like it had just happened in the comics. At the end of the movie, they would have had a tag scene with the Justice League meeting at the Fortress of Solitude, then learning that Starro was coming to conquer Earth, launching themselves into orbit to fight him in space, so like the sequel would have been a Starro movie. Wally West would have also gotten his Flash costume at the end of the movie. So while they were in the middle of making the Christopher Nolan Dark Knight trilogy, they would have had this Justice League trilogy, like a separate franchise they would have had going on. We just saw a version of Starro in James Gunn's Suicide Squad movie with a very different spin on the character, making him more of a tragic figure, and they repurposed a lot of the characters like Maxwell Lord, for instance, in Wonder Woman 1984. James Gunn's brother Sean Gunn is also playing a new version of Maxwell Lord in the new Superman movie later this year. There's a bunch of concept art out there for all the characters, and remember, this is still pretty early days, and it sounds like they had been developing the Justice League movie before the Dark Knight trilogy had really blown up. So they'd known that that was going to do so well, they probably would not have tried to do a Justice League movie at the time. All because it falls into the same trap, like the same criticisms that people had of Zack Snyder's Justice League movie, in that the studio tried to push to Justice League way too fast without taking their time to develop all the characters before jamming them together in a big team-up movie. Literally, that was one of James Gunn's big things when he rebooted DC and did this new Superman movie, is that he would take his time slowly building up all the characters before he tried to do a big Justice League movie with all of them. Which is why we're probably not going to see his Justice League movie till like 2030 or beyond. I think what's really going on with the Armie Hammer Batman movie stuff is that it's more of a coincidence. Like, they approached him knowing that he was about to play Batman a long time ago, and seeing that he was a disgraced actor, they're like, we have our opportunity, we're going to swoop in and try and get him to be in our movie. Normally when someone tries to make a big rip-off movie like this that they know is going to be bad, they won't touch it with a 10-foot pole. But if you're a recently disgraced Hollywood actor, you're really looking for like any job that you can get. So that's basically how this all came together. Personally, I do not think the movie will ever see the light of day. I think literally somebody got on the phone at Warner Brothers in their legal department and are like, please do not make this movie or we will sue you out of existence. So we will see what happens with that, but do not be surprised if you never hear about it again. Maybe someday I'll do a more detailed breakdown of like all the canceled DC movies over the years, just because we have all these new James Gunn reboot DC movies. Every once in a while it just becomes fascinating to see what the plans the studio had for a lot of these movies were, like the DC universe as it existed before Zack Snyder came along. I already did a big video about Zack Snyder's plans for his canceled Justice League 2 and Justice League 3. I'll link the video at the end of this. Because if you thought the Armie Hammer Justice League movie with George Miller that got canceled sounds crazy, Zack Snyder's plans for his Justice League 2 and Justice League 3 are even wilder than that. Everybody click here to learn what was going to happen during that movie, and click here for all my new Superman videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.